We all want to get big and jacked, right? And the quickest way to do that is to bulk. Well, today I want to discuss some potential downsides of bulking. Now, before I start talking about the cons, let's talk about some of the pros. Pro number one, you get to eat a lot. In most cultures, due to just how the human species is hardwired, food is, in many respects, the recreational drug of choice for most people. We all have those foods that we like to eat, and regardless of our fitness pursuits, whether health, aesthetic, or performance oriented, it's real easy to justify adding something that might not be the best for your overall objective into your diet if, you gotta bulk. Sausage on pizza is protein, right? The crust is carbs, cheese is fat. Ice cream, that's protein, fat, carbs, right? So you get to kind of justify checking a lot of boxes, but at the same time, really enjoy yourself doing it. Now this comes with some downsides that we'll discuss later, but we'll stick to the pros for now. So that's kind of the first practical pro, but then the second pro pertaining specifically to performance is, generally speaking, when you're on a caloric surplus, you'll have a lot more energy to put forth towards training and other activities. In general, strength and training intensity goes through the roof when you're on a bulk. And in terms of work-life productivity, when you're not in a caloric deficit and your brain has plenty of glucose to function, it makes the day-to-day a lot easier, not to mention interpretation of stress, sleep quality to some extent, etc., etc. And then the third point pertaining to aesthetics, and this particularly applies to smaller individuals like myself. I believe it was Alex Leonidas, formerly known as Alpha Destiny, who coined the term bear mode, where some of us smaller individuals, when fully clothed, we don't really look that jacked. I mean, yeah, we look like fit and athletic, healthy, but not necessarily jacked. I think it was Dr. Mike Israetel that specifically put numbers to it and was like, yeah, jacked is like 180 plus. I'm pretty lean and muscular, but I'm 155, 156 on a good day. So definitely not jacked by that definition of 180 up. So for some individuals, particularly if you're a shorter, smaller individual, having a little bit of extra weight, being kind of on a permanent bulk or bear mode, quote unquote, might be the aesthetic option that you prefer. So those are all three pretty solid pros. Let's get into some of the potential downsides, however, of bulking. So the first major downside that's going to be a practical consideration to most of you listening to this is going to be to your work capacity when you lift. Now, I did say in the pro section that your intensity is probably going to go up, and this is true. Number one, you're going to have more energy to put forth towards lifting harder and heavier. Number two, with the extra size as well as fluid volume, your leverages in terms of moving weight via joint angles as well as just intracellular leverage is going to improve. So just in terms of the physics of moving the weight, you're going to automatically get stronger just by merit of being a larger creature. That being said, if there's more of you, it's going to take more energy for you to move. So where you might have been able to do, let's pick a big movement like squats, deadlifts, bench, right? You might be able to do 5 sets of 10 to 12 relatively easily. Your fatigue, both within individual sets as well as from set to set, is going to increase significantly from when you were a smaller person. Now, you can offset this by easing into your bulk and doing so more gradually, but if you just all of a sudden jump to a massive caloric surplus and start putting on tons of weight, even if it's good weight, even if it's muscle, you may and are likely to see your work capacity diminish. You'll trade some endurance for some strength. And those might be equitable terms for some of you, but it's just something you should be aware of going into it. That dovetails into another performance consideration, is your athleticism. This ties into the work capacity discussion, but what I'm talking about here specifically are your actual body mechanics, your leverages in terms of moving you, running on a field, doing gymnastics movements, walking on your hands, dancing, climbing up and down things, doing box jumps, whatever it is that you do, throwing a ball, punching and kicking, grappling somebody. All of these things, all of your leverages are going to change slightly once you start putting on a significant amount of additional mass. Things that are very nuanced, like for instance, I mentioned earlier, handstands. I know for me, doing a handstand, for instance, if I add 5-10 more pounds, feels completely different. It feels like I'm in a different body than doing a handstand now at 155. The actual effort notwithstanding, the technique feels different. Running, swimming, martial arts especially, for those of you out there that do jiu-jitsu, boxing, taekwondo, MMA, whatever the case may be. And let's just say you don't do any of those and you're just a pure strength athlete. Even for weightlifters, powerlifters, CrossFitters, you'll find, particularly on some of the big movements, but even some of the little single joint movements, your leverages might change slightly or significantly if you start putting on a ton of mass. And that might be a change for the better as a strength athlete, but as any other kind of athlete, unless being bigger specifically pertains to your sport, like you're a super heavyweight or a defensive end or something like that, taking the whole caloric surplus bulking thing too far might be detrimental to your performance in terms of skills and technique on the field or in the ring. Now we're going to skip over discussing aesthetics because that's an entirely subjective personal preference thing. But what is very objective are some potential health considerations when you're bulking. There are several we could discuss, like for instance, joint wear and tear, but I feel like it would be negligent of me to not discuss the two big elephants in the room health-wise that not potentially, but almost certainly will occur once you get past a certain threshold of accruing additional size. These two things are your blood pressure is likely to go up, and you are potentially, at best, we'll say insulin sensitivity goes down. At worst, we'll say insulin resistance goes up. Now, acutely, neither of these things are too deleterious to your overall health, but if you stay in this condition chronically for months and or years at a time, the increased insulin resistance could lead to prediabetes. The hypertension can lead to a host of cardiac issues, and the combination of the two sets the rest of your systems up for failure and can potentially lead to a cascade of deleterious health outcomes that plague a large amount of the general population. Now, you can attenuate both of these things relatively easily without pharmaceutical intervention. Number one, by maintaining your cardiovascular training, your conditioning, while you are in your bulk. Counterintuitive, right? But you are eating a surplus of calories, and it doesn't take that much cardio in order to attenuate your blood pressure and contribute to your insulin sensitivity. And then as far as insulin sensitivity goes, furthermore, just don't get too fat. The easiest way to increase insulin sensitivity, even more so than pharmaceutical intervention, is just being lean. So while even if you gain a ton of muscle and don't get too fat, your blood pressure is likely to increase. Your insulin sensitivity is not going to increase unless you put on a ton of fat along with the extra muscle. So all that to say, I'm definitely not against bulking, and resistance training is one of the pillars of longevity and a high quality of life going into middle and eventually old age. This is merely a discussion to make you aware of some of the potential downsides if you take the act of bulking too far and or too long. Your lean muscle is similar to an investment where it's never too late to start saving, but the earlier you start, the more interest you can accrue. But like money, make sure you're seeing the forest for the trees and don't get so wrapped up in your pursuit of muscle that it begins to detract from your health and your quality of life. Thanks for watching.